Welcome to this episode of Gone Again. Tonight I have a story about survival that was sent in by one of our viewers. It's about being caught out in the forest unexpectedly, miles from civilization, no hope of rescue. I think you're going to enjoy this. Stick around. My name is Jeff. Years ago, I went into a place called Lake Darling on Lightning Road out of the little town of Clark Fork, Idaho. I live around the Coeur d'Alene area, and this was part of my stomping grounds. I was in my 1952 Willys wagon, which was well equipped for off-road travel and survival. It was on 35-inch oversized off-road tires with locking differentials on both ends. I had a Chevy 292 high-torque 6-cylinder engine under the hood with a Muncie SM465 truck 4-speed transmission and a Rockwell 4-shaft T221 transfer case. All of this going to Dana 44s for axles, the very best. On the front I had a Braden 10,000-pound winch to pull me out of trouble. The old Willys was a going beast off-road, and I always carried all the goods needed to get myself unstuck and to do some trail fixing of things if I broke down. I also carried emergency gear for me, such as food, blankets, and whatnot, and I could sleep in the Willys if I had to. But all that prep was no good on that trip to Lake Darling. I had left home early the day before and had camped out the first night in the back of the Willys. It was mid-fall and bear season was on, so I was up there doing some bear hunting and also scouting for the deer and elk season yet to come. Accordingly, I had enough stuff to stay there for a while. But that first night got cold, and I mean serious cold. I was okay sleeping and all, but it was cold enough that even inside the rig and almost under the covers with me, all of my water bottles froze solid as a rock that first night. Besides that, it snowed 2 feet on top of the foot that was already on the ground. Well, 3 feet of snow sounds like a lot, but my old Wills would go through that much snow like it wasn't even there. That wasn't a problem. And even the 3 creek fordings you had to cross on the road to get there was no issue. The problem came up when, after deciding that hunting bear in all that snow wasn't going to happen, I decided to turn the Willys around and head for lower ground to get down out of the snow. In the process of turning around, just completely and suddenly for no apparent reason, the right front wheel spindle just snapped right off at the bolt flange. Oh crap, that ain't good. I knew that at this time of year, with this much snow and the creek crossings you had to do to get here, that no one would be coming up here until probably spring, because back then, snowmobiling didn't even happen in that area. I knew that area very well because of years spent exploring it, and it's no joke. It's just miles and miles of tall mountains and rough terrain. I only had a few days worth of food, and I knew I had to do something fast because it was freaking mega cold. In fact, those few days and nights were some of the coldest in history for that area, with temperatures dropping down to minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit. It was just after sunup when the spindle broke, and I figured the best thing I could do was to start walking the road back to town, staying on the main road as much as possible, such as it was, so that if I died along the way, at least they'd find my frozen carcass during the spring thaw. Well, I loaded my backpack with as much survival gear as I could carry, grabbed my hunting rifle, shotgun, and put my Ruger 44 Magnum handgun on my belt and started hiking out. I didn't want to leave any of my gear behind to possibly fall into the wrong hands. It was 9 a.m. by that time, and let me tell you that until you've tried hiking and carrying almost 80 pounds of gear through nearly 3 feet of snow, you can't appreciate how freaking hard that is. Anyhow, like I said, I knew the area up there and knew of a couple of spots where I could cut cross country where the going wasn't too bad, and I could save a couple of miles at least because I was at the very end of the road, and that meant that it was about 23 miles back into town or even back to decent road with any sign of civilization. After about 10 miles, I finally had less snow to trudge through. It was still about a foot or a foot and a half, but it was easier than the 3 feet I started with. Ahead, I still had to cross the east fork of Lightning Creek 2 more times, and the water was freezing cold, fast-moving, and waist-deep. This had been no problem for the Willies, but for me now it was extremely dangerous. By 9 p.m., I was just about the halfway point. I hadn't stopped for more than a few minutes to catch my breath, not even to eat, and I still had 1 more creek crossing to go through, even though the mercury was dropping with the nightfall. When I got to the last crossing, I was actually glad to see it because it meant I only had about 5 miles or so to go until I was back to civilization. Now there was only a few inches of snow to walk through, and the road had been recently plowed, making the going easier when I needed it the most. It was almost 1 a.m. when I saw the first lights of town. I was dripping wet, and the old German wool World War II military trench coat I was wearing, along with the gear I was carrying, must have weighed 100 pounds, being saturated with water. Of course, the little town was all closed up. Nothing was open, and I was dead on my feet, having hiked no less than 18 or 19 miles in those conditions. There was the gas station where I'd filled my gas tank the day before. Was it really just yesterday? And even though it was closed, the owner was there working on his snowplow. He got me into the shop by the stove to warm up and called his wife out of bed to make me some good food. He got his work finished and took me to his place where he put me up for the night. Got my gear dried up so that my guns and stuff wouldn't rust all up. That's how I became good buddies with my new friend Dave, and in years after, we would spend time together hunting and having fun. I called my mom the next day and told her what happened so she could drive the nearly 90 or so miles to come get me. I was only in my early 20s at that time, but had it not been for my being young and in great condition, getting stranded up there would have possibly been a death sentence. My point in all this is that being prepared with all the gear is good, but it isn't the full answer. You need to use good sense and not push your luck in way off places like that. Don't go alone, and let others know where you will be and when you plan on being back. In my case, I lived alone and just got a wild hair and took off for that trip and never let anyone know before I left. You have to take the big woods very serious because it can be brutal out there, and Mother Nature has no remorse. Just in case you're wondering, I saved the Willies. The very next day after getting back, I called a couple of buddies and rounded up some tools and parts that would be needed to fix it right where it sat. We loaded all the things we could possibly need into my buddy's 6x6, and along with 3 other friends on snowmobiles went back into what was now 4 feet of snow. The snowmobiles went in on one road that didn't have any creeks to cross, and my buddy Jim and I took the 6x6 in the way that I had previously gone. It had a plow on the front, and we cleared the road as we went in, all 6 wheels having chains put on. Anyhow, we fixed the Willies and drove her out, no problem. It's nice to have good friends that watch out for each other. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I tried to do the story justice, don't know if I did or not. But if you liked it, please give us a thumbs up and share it. Please subscribe, and we'll see you around.